We're heading
We're heading
straight
for
to the abyss.
yeah, we're heading for 300 dead.
3,000 deaths.
Oh,
300
you
with
mean
the heat?
from the so what's the
Sorry,
news on
300 from
vaccine?
the virus.
You guys
Who's
are
is coming, is getting hold.
are you guys getting vaccines? Are you guys in line to get vaccines? What's the situation?
the silence.
Brazil, we're
Vaccines
we're
are there.
gonna see in a
Vaccines.
few weeks.
Hey Zarek, can you answer Reza?
What about Brazil?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the situation in Canada is horrendous. It's
Oh, really?
absolutely bad. Yeah, it's very bad. I mean, I don't think the situation everywhere is the same. Like other than U.S. and Israel, I don't know about Russia, China, Japan. I don't know about Far East. But situation in Europe is as bad. I have family over there. Situation in Canada is not good. There is backlog and the logistics is horrendous. They don't know what they are doing. They buy vaccine and then they expire. They have to throw it away. It's just situation is very bad.
Yeah.
It's the case of shortage for sure because they don't have enough supplies. But more importantly, is the question of mismanagement. Something very simple that you can probably do with a spreadsheet and some people they have mismanaged very, very greatly. So
Also the
And it
U.S. is
seems,
buying them all.
and it seems there's a
buying
ban.
them all too.
There's a ban of some countries on the AstraZeneca vaccine because of side effects.
In Europe, yeah, they halted today in Europe.
Yeah, like in Scandinavia, I think not all of Europe, but I read Scandinavia, Finland, you know.
Well, it was Austria and one other country during the weekend. So Scandinavian, okay.
Yeah, we're probably gonna get ours within like a month and a half.
Where do you live?
In the state, in Michigan.
Michigan, okay. Yeah, this
And
situation.
I'm gonna be the last one in my family too. My entire family, because my sister is in medical school, so she got it at one point already. And my parents are a little older, so they already got it as well. So I'll be the last one.
Yeah, my
I
parents are supposed to get
registered
it
here through a local hospital registered, but they haven't said anything yet. But they opened registration to different groups, and it was our time to register, but nothing. I'm not too. I mean, I work from home, and I don't go a lot of places. Don't see a lot of people, so I'm not in a rush to get that. Like, I'd rather, if it was up to me, I'd rather get it when the next flu season comes, because if you get it now, the risk is down anyway, and you can go outdoors and stuff like that, see people outdoors, and in 3-4 months it will the antibody will go away anyway, so you have to administer when the flu season comes. So I'm not in a rush.
So guys,
But
with that depressing preamble, terrible things to come.
Actually, no. I think the worst is over, if you ask me.
No, I meant our situation. We're going down the hill here.
Not here.
Yeah, here the worst is not over.
No, okay.
No, definitely not.
You're heading to flu season. That is.
Yeah, I mean we haven't even reached peak number of deaths yet. It's still going up. So, and no real structure for the vaccines or anything. So it's not really looking good.
Does Brazil have a vaccine? Did they manufacture a vaccine?
Yeah, right. I mean the Butantan.
Yeah, there's a collaboration between the Sinovac laboratory and the Butantan laboratory. CoronaVac supposedly is I don't know what percentage is Brazilian, whatever. But yeah, there is that. But the federal government was against it all the time. I mean, for months and months and months. This was sponsored by sponsored by the state government of São Paulo, And this is quite quite weird.
Like
here,
they are
quite
against it by
serious
still saying
situation.
it's a hoax? Are they
They-
still saying it's a hoax?
They
And
toned it down a bit,
Yeah.
but now everyone is a bit skeptical anyway. It's like a year worth of the president saying it was a hoax, and now he's saying that it's not, but it 1 year worth of propaganda.
He sometimes says it's not, and sometimes he goes back
Yeah.
to his former position. So this is the difficult thing. Like he never says one thing.
Mhm.
And of course, we don't believe him. Whatever. For me, it's irrelevant. But in the bigger scheme, it has a lot of effect.
Yeah.
This is a problem.
Anyway, so I think that, I mean, we didn't have any presentation scheduled for today. The idea, I think, was just to have one of those meetings we had a long time ago. We stopped doing those, where we just tried to kind of map out what has been done, what we could do next. So, I mean,
Do we have a schedule already? Is there a thing? Are there things scheduled already? I
No,
haven't
after
seen
this
the-
week, for next week, I don't think we have anything scheduled.
Okay.
So I think that would be a good thing to leave the meeting with. I mean, my proposal, let me just share my screen here. My proposal was that, I mean, I listed everything that I remembered, and we added some other stuff, like Hanzo added and other stuff. Everything that was mentioned. My idea was that we could leave today's meeting with at least some of these scheduled for the next couple of months. You know, even if it's like 3 months away, it's better to have a date and know to plan ahead, you know, and to prepare, and then to like wait until it's ready and then we present, because it might never come. So perhaps it would be good just to add some dates, you know, to some of this stuff. Or at least, I mean, I think we before saying anything, we could talk a bit about, I know, like we have here the stuff we've been doing, right? This is the last time we did a discussion like this. Discussion of further steps was November last year. After this, we had all these meetings of crazy stuff being presented. So I think this meeting shouldn't even be discussion of further steps. It should be like, what the fuck is being, what's going on?
How many meetings? Let me see that. Like it's a lot, right?
Yeah, man. This was November 2020, right?
Okay, yeah.
Just
I
after
remember.
this meeting, we published the Crisis and Critique text.
Yeah.
After this, we had, I presented something on the book I wrote with a friend. Dennis
Yeah.
presented on open games. We read a bit of Bogdanov. It was the first time we read it. I think that was even this meeting here is when Raquel and Renzo, I think, gave the idea of reading Bogdanov. So this was the first time we read it. Then Renzo presented the idea for the online platform that we're now kind of talking about in parallel. We read like 3 chapters of Bogdanov, right? This is 1, 2, and 3. Dennis presented on games. Caron presented on that Evans text on the space of reasons.
Yeah, that was me and Pedro, the first one.
Yeah. We did 3 presentations on our primer text, right? You did 2 presentations on the equality of all minds, on Negarestani's work. John presented last week. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, like almost 15 meetings since.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's taken a few weeks off too, right?
Yeah, and this with our break to rest. So it's a lot of stuff, I think. I mean, to the point that this way of presenting is starting to become too crowded even. Look at this. Like, it's a bit too much, you know? I'm not even sure if we should just keep it like this. It's clearly becoming, it's starting to have the face of Cthulhu, the monster.
Yeah.
Right? With like tentacles and doesn't it look like a squid?
Lola Livre.
Yeah, it definitely does.
So there you go. There you go. That's how you build secular monstrous god. Suck it, accelerationist. So there, yeah. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff, and I would even say that perhaps could be. I know it's kind of besides the point, perhaps, and extra work, and perhaps not really something anyone wants to focus on. But at some point in the near future, even the question of how to present a research that has so many tentacles will become an important topic. Like, I mean, I think this has been very useful and very simple for the website. But at some point we might, I don't know, have to resort back to a list, right? And John, I mean, if you're studying inventory, perhaps there is like a wiki. We can create our own wiki page. I don't know.
Yeah, we need, I think, we're gonna need like another sense of scale, right?
Yeah.
I think
Of like different stages.
We could come up with a topical index and try to break it up into 3 or 4 and then have lines over like for things that are economics, things that are strictly math or logic, things that are.
Yeah, I really think that this is actually a really good exercise. You mentioned this last time, and I think we could definitely apply it to the group itself, right? I mean, these arrows, they don't really mean much. For example, there are parts of this that might connect to this and parts of this. I mean, it could be interesting to have like whoever is presenting come up with either a description, like a written description, or at least a number of tags, you know, that could facilitate this cross-referencing. Because it's also a good way to kind of force us to think a bit more together as well. And it could help with the website, right? Right. I think this is even a good place to start, because if you look at this, I think there's only one thing that has no kind of no chain, right? Which is what Renzo presented, which for now, we haven't really done anything else on scale or that deals with probability spaces and things like this. So it kind of became unconnected, right? Everything else is connected to something further down the line. Yeah, anyway.
I agree that I think it would be good to try to develop more connections between all of these various tentacles, right?
Well, but
I don't know how to do that, but
isn't the connection the manifesto that we published? That's supposed to be the connection.
yeah, I
but
would
I mean,
say
there are
that,
other
but
stuff,
developing
right?
that further, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
make it more refined.
Yeah, also because I think we went to places we didn't necessarily foresee, right? Not everything that we've been doing was clear, so there might be connections that we didn't think about. So I don't know, like, I don't know what Obsidian is. A second brain.
Yeah, I've been using this. I just started it. I'm still learning. It's supposed to give you a constellation-like view of what you're doing if you just upload your notes there, copy and paste your notes, and then there are ways we need. Well, like each note functions like a hypertext, and you can then create links between different notes, something like like that. and then it generates automatically a visualization of that, you know. Like this might be useful, I think. I'm not sure because I'm starting to use it right now. I really don't have any proficiency yet, but it has a lot of features.
Ah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it'd be
I
nice
do
to have
that
like a
they
group
automate
version.
the actual diagrams and connections. That seems like something that we're gonna have to get to pretty quick.
Yeah, this could
Yeah,
be
I mean,
amazing.
in the original version of the website, we had something that automatically connected things, but it wasn't very flexible. That was the problem.
Yeah.
But this is text-based, so I'm not sure how we would implement, maybe, not sure, like maybe have like a little abstract of each presentation and then have a hypertext like link to the other ones and then generate the visualization. Not sure, because this is more text-based. Not sure if you could like put the video of the presentation there. I don't think
Yeah,
so.
well, perhaps we can just have the link, right, to the presentation, a short description and the tags.
Yeah, like the description should link to all the relevant presentations, like, and this should enable the automatic view of the constellation view of the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all up for it if we can perhaps try it and see if it works and something like this. I think that one characteristic that is good to have in mind is just something that everyone can work with, and that doesn't really take one person to kind of update it, right? So that it's easy for everyone to do. And the best version of it would be something that we can embed, like, you know, on our website, and it just updates automatically as we are updating it in the ourselves, right?
Mhm.
So, but I mean, I think that my impression is that my suggestion at least is that before we kind of propose, I mean, some of these things, for example, linear logic is something that appeared inside of Caron's presentation on Space of Reasons, which was already in dialogue with Pedro. And also in more recently in your presentation on Negarestani's Labor of the Inhuman, you guys mentioned linear logic, and we said, it would be interesting to have something.
And there was some kind of relationship to Dennis's also presentation. There was a point there that I don't remember exactly what was the relationship, but it appeared there. Like
we were talking about open games.
Well, there's a relationship between open games and game semantics, right? Like I missed the presentation, but I think that would be the sort of connection, right?
So I mean, I think it's a good example of something that appeared as a possible development based on things we were doing that weren't necessarily kind of focused on it, right? So I don't know, I'm not sure where to begin. My suggestion was that we could try to talk a bit about where we currently stand with the different lines of research. I'm not sure if like people who presented before could perhaps talk a bit, in a more synthesized form about what we've been doing, just so we can kind of get a group feel for where we're at and where we could have like in an immediate future, because it would be good for the future presentations to be in dialogue with not only what you did prior, but what others are doing as well, right? In fact, I feel like this is why this is something that I think that in John's presentation at the end was a bit, we discussed this a bit, which is that it seems like, for example, from the stuff that Dennis and I have been working on, we did like a couple of presentations trying to go line by line in the text, but we didn't really try to, let's say, give a sort of presentation on how could something else kind of enchain itself to this project, right? How could it be mobilized to other ends or with other people's research? I think that in part, we ended up talking about, for example, possible connections between this discussion, right, the predicate logic that we're using, and you know, issues on this regarding space of reasons and things like this, but it wasn't very developed. I think we could definitely, for example, do a presentation trying to be a bit more, to focus a bit more on the general feel of it, you know? Like, I feel like the methodological discussions we had concerning the primer were discussion, it tends to go towards discussions of what is the justification for Badiou's philosophy? And that's not really necessary, right? I mean, we could have a more, let's say, specific discussion on, okay, we saw what this reconstruction of capital is kind of like, but how can you mobilize this for other ends? What other questions we could be asking, or how can this be used? What is kind of the broader perspective that this is trying to push forward, you know? So that's one thing that I think we could do, which is also, I mean, is not necessarily the next step in the research itself, but it's a step that could help to connect with other parts of the research that other people are doing. I don't know, like that's one thing.
Yeah.
One thing for me, and Reza kind of brought up, you know, how this all links back to the original kind of manifesto for the project is, like, I guess whenever we're doing a presentation, if there is a kind of priority of all these different topics of certain things, like, should we be trying to link to the political phenomenology primarily? Is that a kind of centralizing point, or are we thinking of this more as like trying to connect with everything? And I'm not advocating one way or the other, but I am myself, I feel that's ambiguous right now.
Yeah. I actually was thinking about this just before we started. Like, I think that one thing we probably Dennis and I should also try to do more explicitly. I don't know what you think, Dennis, but I feel like we went down a particular rabbit hole because of the specificity that this crazy idea is requiring us of, like, focusing on what the fuck is organic composition of capital and how do you formalize it and blah, blah, blah. But that's, I mean, that takes a ridiculously huge amount of effort. But as we try to say in the beginning of the text, we are not formalizing parts of capital for its own sake. The argument is structured in the form that if this is possible, then something else, which is the interesting part, is possible. So I also think it's good to not lose, from our perspective at least, it's good not to lose sight of what's really the essential part, right? I mean, it's nice to test the power of an idea on a classical, canonical material and manage to try to get something new out of it. I think that's a good kind of proof that the concept is not empty, right? That there's something to it. But it's still a test. Like, it's not in itself the end goal. So it would be good to kind of focus also and kind of spend some time discussing how this could be redirected, right? Or how to take that broader perspective as well. I mean, that's relevant also because we are trying to finish this and move to the second part of the research, which would connect a bit more with that larger goal. So I think
having the original write-up that we published in mind, is there, if we wanted to go through the research that we have done, would that manifesto give us any list of criteria that we can prioritize these researches and say that these are the cream of the crop and will not go down, and take like 2-3 topics or 4 topics that we focus, and then the rest would be topics that people can focus, but in a more smaller groups than like this big group. I'm just a little bit cautious about this prioritization. Would that give us enough criteria to prioritize the work that we have done so far for the sake of what we can do in 2021?
But what you guys, I mean, you and John both mentioned priorities, but like by priority, you mean something that will help you choose what to focus your own research next?
No.
No. I mean, something that our group can focus. I'm sure that everybody has, like in my case, I have a line of research that I haven't discussed here because, and the reason that I haven't discussed here is because there is a manifesto for what we do here. All I'm trying to say is that would that manifesto give us the required criteria to see what are after a year of research, what is it that we have learned and how we want to conduct our 2021?
Yeah, I see now. I think, I mean, I'm not
More
sure
or
if
less the
anyone.
same to me, yeah.
I was just gonna say that I do think that there are at least, so if there's nowhere to start, there's at least a few like common intersections between like probably most of the threads, at least like in a vague sense, like for example, like just the concept of scale and adding that to, I guess, instances that often didn't take that into consideration. It's just one example.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a few things like that we could probably pick out, and I mean, not necessarily like as a focus, like you have to do this, but as like a lighthouse in the distance.
Yeah, I think we could list those things like you mentioned. So
That's a good idea.
Scale issues, right? That seems to be something that appears often, right?
I think it was more specific than that. Yasha, correct me if I'm wrong. It's the idea is that the introduction of scale might change. No, it's okay. Leave it there, Gabriel. Like the introduction of scale might change how we view things where scale was not yet present as a component, as a dimension, right?
Yeah.
I think that's quite striking. I think that's a good description of almost everything that's being done here.
Yeah, I disagree just in one point, which is a critique that I've been wanting to. I mean, this is also why Yasha and I are planning to do the presentation on Natal, because I think that I agree with that, but I also think it's not we don't really have a good grasp of what scales are like. So I wouldn't just say like introduce this issue where it's not being discussed, but clearly it would be good to also do more research on what we mean by the term, how, what are the concepts that actually articulate the questions of scale. Why can't we simply substitute scale for quantity or for, like largeness and small, like it would be good to research further what we mean by scales as well, not only like bring it as a kind of critical tool.
But I take it as part of the same.
No, I agree. I just think it's worth, like, for example, I think it would be good at some point.
Scale is like performing a function in these different issues, like the idea of a certain vague idea of scale. Of course, there is, I think, a lot to be explicated from these ideas, and this is, of course, one of at least my own lines of research is that, like, what does it mean to talk about scale in different contexts? That is why I wanted to bring over like Mark Wilson, which is not directly concerned with political issues, but he's very concerned with the issue of scale as such. for instance, in scientific practices and things like that.
Yeah, no, but it's precisely to kind of show why that sort of thing is clearly connected with the stuff we're doing. I mean, Mark Wilson is, you could say it's not like directly about bringing the issue of scale to politics, but we still should investigate better, you know, how this idea or this field of question.
Yeah, but he's about bringing the issue of scale to natural language, for instance, and this is ostensibly his project. Like, he's trying to be a common sense philosopher, almost an ordinary language philosopher. I don't agree with that approach per se, but he's almost an ordinary language philosopher that thinks, okay, but if our talk is contextually defined, there is also this issue of scale, for instance, that comes up when you are, for instance, analyzing the composition of matter, for instance. So it is I think one instance of what Yasha was saying. Like, there is this, you know, kind of philosophy of language approach that takes for granted the issue of scales, and then Mark Wilson is bringing this issue to this particular field. It's not a political field, but maybe we could learn something about scale if we look at this.
I totally agree. I just wanted to like highlight this because, I mean, for the last couple of months, I've heard and read a bunch of new stuff on that brings up this word. Rarely do I learned anything about what the hell scales are, because it's very
but I think
black box.
But I think that that's also like a kind of a good point in regards to this in general, right? Like that there isn't really like any sort of like common sense about what issues of scale are, right? Like in this sort of like nexus between like things that could be formalizable and things that are a bit more difficult to formalize. Like, I don't think, like, maybe I'm like that wrong, but I think that there isn't really like, I think between like everything that we covered, like there are very, very different ideas of scale involved, and like maybe trying to get a sense of like what it like, and I think that this would like go directly against like Mark Wilson's idea, but whatever, is that like maybe in sort of like trying to make it a bit more precise and get a sense of like what are these different forms of talking about scale. Like maybe we could get a sense of like also how to integrate them or to sort of like freely apply them depending on what subject are we talking about. And I think that this is also something that it would make a lot of sense. But something that I was thinking about in relation to the diagram and the things that we talked about, it is like, I think in a weird way, I think that the platform brings it all together in a weird way, right? Like that we're talking about like scale, organization, formalizing certain things. And I think while also thinking about like some sort of tool. And I think that maybe like, although like we all have like very different backgrounds and interests, like by sort of like bringing this to fore would be like a really interesting way of thinking of like how these ideas actually apply to doing things, right? Rather than like, oh, we're building like this sort of like theoretical background for work. No, it's like, how can we take our ideas or the ideas that we've been discussing and be a bit more like pragmatic with them in the sense of like, okay, but like, how does this apply to actual organizing? And I think that the platform is like a really like interesting spot for this.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the platform's a really good testing ground. And I was also thinking, Pedro, while you're talking about basically the different levels of the question of scale, the diagram that Dennis and Gabriel presented, which starts with logic of worlds and technology and whatnot and progresses up to capitalism, modern social formations. I think that's an interesting thing to talk about in connecting all these things as well. Like what are you kind of bringing at that level of abstraction? Are we talking about everything that has to do with organization as such, worlds, transcendentals, all that stuff? Are we talking about analyzing capitalism? And it gives us a way to kind of like discuss things, whether it's scales or particular topics, And it also, I found it really useful in my presentation, trying to organize what exactly I want to talk about at what level. And I also think in terms of practical applications, in addition to the platform, part of the reason I brought up like those concrete geopolitical questions at the end was also in that spirit. It'd be nice if whatever interests we all had, we were kind of coming up with ways to demonstrate in more kind of empirical or very specific domains how these ideas apply, or whether or not we find that they come up lacking in those analyses.
Actually, no. Just so we don't skip something, like the thing that Pedro said about the platform bringing a lot of ideas together. I think it's a good justification for us to. I mean, we've been meeting separately about the platform. It would be nice at some point just give like a kind of report on how it's going, what problems we're facing, because it's already happening, like interesting issues. You know, like we're having to cut some ideas out, simplify, think about implementation issues. So it might be good to bring it back to the main meeting and use it as material, right? One thing that I also think it's a relevant. I mean, I know what diagram you mean, John. The one that we did, like it wasn't very serious. Like it's definitely too specialized. Like it's too
schematic right now.
No, it's not only too schematic. Like we had that idea of writing something that goes from like Badiou's general theory of worlds, which like speaks about worlds in general, and then you can kind of go a bit more specific with Bogdanov. You have like worlds, but with some added condition, right? Worlds of some type, which seems to be what we call like organization. So they have this energetic point of view. We were talking about this last time, right? It's much more connected to physics and to situated materialism in a more classic sense than Badiou. And then we said, well, we went from Bogdanov to Karatani by reducing this to that idea of a transcendental, like a social formation which has capitalism and other things. And then Marx is here because he talks about this, right? That is what Dennis and I used in our minds to organize kind of what we're doing. Capital is here, the book, and we are bringing the mathematics, the formalism from here, right? The point of view from here, and the kind of multi-perspective from here, right? And that's how so you get something that the primer covers a bit of this. It's not talking about organization in general, but it's also talking a bit more than what Marx himself was doing, right? So recovering this space in a way. But I mean, that doesn't mean that's not a priority. Nobody needs to be Badiouian or even to like Bogdanov. It's just, I don't think it fits for everyone. It's just something that helps to understand how to situate the text primer, right? In a general methodology. We use the methodology that describes much more than Karatani, Marx, or Bogdanov want, right? It's the methodology is coming from here. The sort of style or point of view comes from here. And then it's from Karatani and Marx that we're taking the cue of how to formalize a complex capitalist social formation, right? The content, I would say, is coming from here. It's not that obvious because actually Marx is totally changing the method as well, but so we probably would have to have an arrow from here. But I think it helps with our text, but I don't think it really spells out something that is common to everyone.
No, it wasn't so much that this is common to anyone, but I do think in terms of, and I'm not saying that was the ultimate end all be all, but that kind of.
It does look a lot like a big end all of be all kind of graph.
Well, it does, I think, give at least a starting point of what we're talking about in terms of interconnecting these things. because obviously, like, I can tell there's a lot of different opinions on Badu and how important he is, but it's not so much Badu as the kind of like usage of category theory and topos and
Yeah,
whatnot.
I
And
agree.
that's valid regardless of whether or not we reject or hold on to logics of worlds, just as a lot of Bogdanov's ideas, even if we don't hold to Bogdanov, there's plenty of other things in systems theory that corroborate. And so
Yeah.
to me, it's less a question of the proper names and our adherence to them, and more like we are clearly moving towards some kind of methodologies that are generic in certain places and obviously don't apply to all things. But I feel like part of what we're working on is exactly what they do apply to and the different ways we can parse it out and give scope to people to carry out their research projects while still tying it together in a common, maybe methodology is too specific. Maybe we want to have a variety of methodologies, but something that links this stuff together, I guess.
I
Yeah,
think you
but
can
this
also
is-
interpret that. Oh, sorry, Dennis, but the that diagram you had is like I would say a branch of this like bigger interconnected network that already exists that we're just trying to figure out after the fact now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that I mean, this thing that John said, perhaps you're right? I mean, there are some, let's say, general interests towards similar, I mean, I would put category theories here, you know, linear logic has a lot of connections here as well. We're talking about, you know, methods for treating natural language and normative commitments. They all are formal in a similar kind of line, you know, privileging more relational or interactional structures over more substantial or.
And in my view, I think the work that you and Dennis did is a substantial step forward from the manifest that we published.
I agree. There are a lot of stuff there that I didn't think. I just thought we just thought of now. Like it wasn't really planned.
Yeah, I mean, granted that work is focused on Marx, but hold on. Granted that work is focused on Marx, but I think the framework that you guys developed, first of all, the introduction was really, really good. I mean, I think everything that we have been saying is tied up nicely in that introduction. The relation between, I don't know why this thing comes up, the relation between organization and politics, where the question of scale probably fits in that relationship. The relationship between Bogdanov and Karatani, which the theoretical grounding of the question of organization is there, and also the relationship of phenomenology to the latter question. I think if we not strip away, but if we put aside the discussion about the intricacies about capital and just focus and hone into what that framework really means from a methodological point of view, I think it is, if you distill what we did in 2020, I think that would be it. So we published, like you said, we published a manifest in 2020 about what this group is working on. If we wanted to publish a manifest for 2021, I would think that would be it. The introduction, as well as the non-specific parts of the framework, non-specific to Marx. And then from there, we start identifying lines of research, things that we don't know. Like you said, the question of scale, and some of the other questions that is raised in that context for our 2021 research. Sorry, something keeps coming up. iTunes keeps coming up on my machine. I don't know why. Anyway, so I would say that let's focus on publish a manifesto for 2021 by using what you guys did in that article that you published. That is what I would say.
But is everyone like? Does everybody want to adopt a common framework? It seems a bit hasty because everyone's very like interested in different things. So
that is correct. That would be my worry too. But that would be my proposal to see whether we can coalesce around it. It makes a lot of sense to me. Like if this group is gathered around that manifesto we published, there shouldn't be far off from the introductory, from the framework that you guys wrote. Otherwise, we have developed other ideas from manifesto, which is exactly fine too. Let's just say manifesto is no longer manifesting what we gather here. That is fine too. But if we still think it does, I don't think it's very far off from what you guys wrote.
Yeah, I have a similar concern as Ben. Is that one thing that I'm really concerned with is that I feel like it would be good before we make a step that supposedly unifies something in a given direction. That I think, for example, that my impression is very particular. I have the impression, for example, that the last couple of months we did, I think John doesn't really fit this duality, but I feel like there is two avenues which we haven't really managed to bring together, for example, or to at least spell out the differences so that we can figure out how they can focus on different things that are nevertheless helping each other out, right? The stuff we did on the primer, which I think connects with what John did, connects with the stuff that that I presented before on that multi-layer organizational scheme. And there is a stuff on space of reasons, normativity, which I think it's very common. The first step is to kind of list some divergences and say, okay, this starts from a different presupposition. That's okay, that's normal. But it's good to, let's say, the useful thing is to understand the divergence so that we can actually focus on, well, if it's divergent, it's probably going to focus on something different. It's going to bring something that to the table that we wouldn't arrive at some other way, right? So I'm just worried that we kind of don't take advantage of that divergence, by kind of funneling into something that should be the same too early, as Dennis was saying. I definitely see much more, on the things that are relevant, I see much more similarities than differences. I do think that this idea of, I'm just raising this because it's too crowded, but I think that this kind of idea, it does say a lot of stuff that, I don't know, we did seem to find some common ground on, being interested in formal methods that are more contemporary, that treat logic in new ways and connect logic with spaces, computation, things like this. That's all between category theory and other stuff we discussed. I think that there is some common ground on that. The point of view that is interesting has to do with organization in a vague sense of, things can have many scales, many layers. Things are complex. To focus on a more relational point of view, you don't even need to know which philosophy grounds that point of view. It might be very divergent, right? You can start from a more computational perspective, and complexity is thought through computational complexity, scale, and blah, blah, blah. Appears differently. You're focusing on linear logic and God knows what. Fine, doesn't matter. But in that point, right, organizations, those are not the contents of the research, but they're similar, as you guys were saying, points of view that are informing whatever material we're focusing on, right? And it seems that up to some point, at least I haven't seen that much divergence in this issue yet. Perhaps there is this common or kind of similar idea that the material at stake in the research has something to do with politics, capitalism, political economy, but from a perspective that since we're using these methods and we're taking this point of view, it's a sort of regional rather than a critical view of capitalism, right? It's about experimentation with something else, it's about trying something out, it's about embedding forms of capitalism in richer theories that can also talk about other things. What those other things are, we might disagree. So for example, if the way that you use this method and talk about this point of view is with a language or a grammar closer to normative commitments and normative philosophy, you might, for example, talk about this richer environment as a richer normative environment. That's okay. It's still the same basic principle, right? If you're using the Badiou stuff, you might talk about this method and talk about this point of view in a slightly different way, and then talk about generic supplements. Okay, but ultimately that basic thing is similar, you know? So, I mean, I think perhaps John perhaps was more right than I thought, like in the idea that there is something to this if we remove the commitment to authors. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Like, I think that these ideas, right, of some basic methods, we're still learning, we're interested in. We had a lot of meetings on the method itself, like Yasha presented on space and logic, helped us to understand what does it mean to treat, the connection between logic and pathology. Dennis presented also on generative effects, seen from the perspective of category theory, things like this. We are reading Bogdanov. We're talking about giving presentations on the concept of scale, things like this, right? They fit kind of this second perspective. And I think that we had some meetings on this sort of strategy, right, of discussing capitalism, but also doing it from a perspective that never doesn't really let the capitalism be equated with the totality, right? It's a totality, but you can still talk about the issue of what is not capitalism, how could you experiment with something else, what would that mean, things like this. Again, there are many things we could do or many positions in that field, but it seems to me that that's an underlying commitment that we discussed, right? I'm not sure what you guys think. Do you guys think this is a fair description, like of?
Yeah, I do think that it's a fair description. Yes,
I agree. Yeah.
If Caron and I agree, then probably
you're exaggerating.
Yeah, of course.
Attention. Yeah.
The biggest antagonism in the.
We plan. It's a Stalinist antagonism. We plan before the meeting, and then we just do a
it's
theater.
for the publicity in the future.
Now that I know that
People will
Gabriel
learn
is
about
looking back at his book uncomfortably, I want to propose reading a chapter from it together.
No, that would
But
be,
actually, I do think chapter 6 on institutions has been something that has been influencing my brain around this group. And I think like the institutional question and what it means to like take a method that a bunch of individuals agree on into something that is an institutionalized process. I actually do think that chapter is an interesting place to start. But in general, the questions around that, the shift from like, okay, do a bunch of theorists agree on this to like, what does it mean to turn this into a process that doesn't require any given individual to agree with it or something like that? That doesn't require the individual point. Seems really important. And it seems like because of the methods, number one, because of their formalized, like it's actually lends itself to this kind of institutionalization in a way that part of the reason I sent out that text on conjunctures last week was because I found it was a holdover from old language that isn't very productive anymore. And it's very hard to imagine how people could institutionally, collectively work out of this kind of like outdated metaphysical language from Hegel. And I think one of the big things that this project is opening up is actually something that enables a more elegant and consistent institutionalization, because we're working in formalities, not in metaphysical language.
No, I generally agree with you. I just think that there's definitely, I mean, I don't want to put my own work too much down, but I definitely think there's much better things to read. I mean, we could read the stuff that I read and pretended like it was my ideas, you know. We can go straight to the original pure source. But I mean, Reza, for example, you were mentioning the stuff that we wrote on the text that went out on Crisis and Critique, right? It had these ideas were there, right? Do you recognize them there, do you think?
No, I recognize. I just say, I think probably I don't want to jump the gun, but I think those ideas, the culmination of those ideas is the introduction you wrote to the primer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a more chewed, nice reading than that text in the Crisis and Critique. Like those two, like 5 pages we wrote there, I think that they're more concise, to the point, not so kind of dense, but
so what I'm proposing are 2 things, actually, not 1 thing. I'm saying that it's good, if not for the purpose of publication, but it's good that we write a manifesto for 2021 that organizes our research for 2021. And I happen to think that those 5-6 pages is that manifest. Now, if not everybody sees that, I would understand it. But I still think that writing a manifesto is a good idea.
yeah, I mean, sure. I think if anyone wants to give it a try, and I mean, it's always nice to try to systematize things. And
I'm least qualified because I missed probably most of the meetings.
that really puts a different spin on your suggestion. Guys,
Yeah.
we should write a manifesto, but I mean, I haven't really been following the group, so.
Well, so I probably am a little bit skewed because I read the primer, I really liked it. I read the manifesto, I really liked it, and I missed a lot of meetings. And I'm sorry, guys,
No, don't worry, man.
too many different commitments. So take it as with that grain of salt that I missed Yasha's, JP's. I really liked Evan's text. It was really good. I really liked it, and I got that book as well afterwards. But anyway, so that's my suggestion.
Yeah,
but
I
sorry,
just
Dan,
wanted
yeah.
to point out, like, just maybe I'm thinking too literally here, but when we say we have this 3 things, a method, point of view, and material, are we saying that going forward, everyone's presentation must somehow use 1, 2, or 3, or some combination of these 3 things? And is that like a requirement we're putting down? Like, what does it mean to coalesce here? Besides like loosely agree with these things.
I wouldn't say coalesce in the sense of agreement. I'd say to examine, having that framework in view, the points of disagreement as well. Like, for instance, my own research has to do with the tension between totality and regionalization. So it has to do with 3, like capitalism as a region, but it has to do also with pre-theoretical assumptions, whereas how can you regionalize if you take, for instance, language as your framework. So I don't think really like it's difficult to see every endeavor in the group falling into 1 or 2 or 3 of these categories, but in a sense, it will be loosely related to, I think it's a good framework, it's a good thing to have in mind. And sometimes, because of the nature of the research, you might have to go back to, method, for instance, a discussion between different methods in order to understand what does it mean to regionalize something in the material and all that. So I'm not sure if we really need to coalesce around the agreement, perhaps. But I do agree with Reza. I think that might be not, I don't think it's a mandatory or anything like that, but it might be fruitful to think up a manifesto for 2021, because not in the sense that we will necessarily reach an agreement and put it in the manifesto, but I think to have a manifesto in mind would create the traction, in a sense, to create the connections, and maybe even if there are still disagreements regarding theoretical assumptions, to put them in the manifesto. Like this is in itself an interesting theoretical work.
I think one good way maybe to at least start working towards this could be to implement maybe like the idea from the circle of like everyone trying to contribute some portion with like no necessarily rule about it in some common field, and then it kind of evolves over time. And that could become like, if it's just even as simple as like in a shared Google Doc, and then people can kind of edit over what other people have written, and it can kind of grow. I don't know. That could be an interesting way to develop ideas that are more in dialogue with one another, rather than just like section on like each presentation or whatnot,
Honestly, I would just
It could be
I
something
like
to try.
that. I like that. Actually,
too.
we can create sections in a Google Doc and say, what do you think are the main points? What are the gains from 2020, and what are the hopes for 2021?
Yeah, but I mean, okay, let me just, my problem is, shouldn't we talk about the gains and stuff? Like, why write something? Like, I mean, let's not forget that text was not a manifesto in the sense of, this is what we will do. Of course, there was that section, but it was also about reporting on results, right? We wrote it because there was some accumulated baggage. We didn't simply anticipate the future. Like, manifestos have very much that idea of, this is what we are, this is what we came to do, right? I have the impression that, though I like that idea very much, I mean, whoever wants to pick it up, work on it, I think it's great. But I think that I mean, as a group of philosophers, there is a tendency to take everything that is happening in the world and live through it in a text rather than in the world. So we're already doing presentations. We're already trying to get people to engage with each other on presentations. I'm not sure if we need, I mean, I'm not really clear why we need a new mechanism to make people engage in a like direct text form, like compressed into like a statement. I feel like my priority at least would be to make sure first that everyone feels like there is a place for them and what they are interested in what we're doing, that everyone sees the commonalities between what they're interested in, what others are interested, so that they can also steer their presentations to cover similar ground. So now that I know Caron presented something on Reza, presented something on Space of Reasons, I might, in my next presentation, make the effort to refer to that, right? And to give it some room in my own approach. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's final, that it's written down. Caron might tell me that that's not a good way of doing it, and I'll have some new info for next time, right? But I think that before we even set the idea of putting something to paper, which I think is actually going to be very hard if these other steps are not covered. Like, I'm kind of worried that I would like for people to feel like, okay, I have this research. Sure, this research group has some direction. It's not doing anything. It's doing some things, right? It's still very broad in scope, but it's not anything. And finding the space that those things agree. My research goes this direction, but I can take a part of it. Like Reza was, interested in the connection between analytic philosophy and Badiou, for example. Taken in its pure form, it might be outside of the scope, but there might be a way of combining it, right? Making it so that you can talk about what you're interested in, Reza, that you want to develop, but that also forwards this big mixture of presentations and ideas.
But I remember distinctly from one of the meetings that you mentioned, I don't know whether this was here or elsewhere, that this is a research group, not the research group, right?
Yeah,
So
well,
this-
but that
this-
goes without saying.
So if it is a research group, then it should be focused on a particular topic or a groups of topic that have a relationship with each other. It's
Yeah, but
not
that's what I'm
something.
saying.
No, well, then you cannot please everybody.
But
Right.
again, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Okay,
I'm sure you're
so-
doing some, but I mean, if there's absolutely no intersection between your interests and the basic principles of this research, there's no point of you making the effort, right? I mean, why make the effort to present something that is totally outside of what you want to study?
Okay, so but then in that case, then we have to have a definition of what I thought the original question to this, and again, probably I'm the least qualified person to make that. By the way, in 2021, I intend to participate more actively, but at this moment, I'm just making comments in relation to the questions that were raised in this meeting.
Mhm.
So the questions were raised, it was, you showed that web of different ideas and different, and how do we prune that? How do we create or take, my understanding of your question, maybe I misunderstood, was how can we take some of these topics, make them interrelate, and then say which one has priority to the overall project that we had. So to me, two questions were asked. One was the question of relation to the overall intent of this research group, and then the question of priority. So then I said, manifest is whatever the document we published is declaring or expressing what this research topic was, and then use that as a criteria to prioritize. So to me, I think they are still relevant for this group. Now, of course, I like you said, Badiou and analytical philosophy. That could be another research group on Tuesdays that we set up and we discuss and we learn, all of us present and learn more about analytical philosophy. That could have its own manifesto or publication and could have participants, things like that.
We tried to publish a manifesto last year, but we didn't get picked.
What,
We
the
weren't
analytical?
accepted. We tried to write something exactly on that topic.
Oh yeah. Who you sent it where?
Please.
It was to Plea, the Warwick Journal, Warwick University.
No, yeah. So we send it to Agon. Agon publish anything we say.
No, look, but again, I'm all for any ideas. And my point is just that practically, right, there's a reason why most presentations are from a small group of people here, right? There's a reason why, like, that publication was written unevenly by all of us. And in the very practical domain, to sort that out, right, to make it more of a group that benefits from everyone's ideas and for what everyone is doing, it's good to, I think, establish, it definitely is connected with what you're saying, Reza, but I think it's good to establish it for ourselves more than to put it on paper. Like, I think putting it on paper is, in my opinion, secondary. I think personally.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Right.
I agree.
On that sense,
But
I think it's,
you have to have the idea. The writing will come.
yeah, I mean, we wrote something like that was published in November. We're in March.
Yeah.
Right.
No, the writing will be a consequence of this fruition.
Yeah, so what I wanted to make sure we have some platform, like some time to discuss is, of course, there are many different approaches to certain topics. There are different underlying commitments to certain topics, and there are also different interests in what to focus, because ultimately it's the interest that is going to make the payoff for sacrificing some of your time to present in an autonomous group like this worth it, because you're interested in getting the input, you're interested in reading something, talking about something. So finding a way to benefit from that and to make everyone feel like they are, okay, I get an idea of where we are, where we could go, how I could contribute. My opinion is that is my priority personally, because there's definitely a lot we could like pull from that publication from last year. A lot of questions. I totally agree that there was some progress, some new stuff appeared, right? But then again, it's not very obvious. For example, to go back to something we were talking before, it's not very obvious how someone who's focused on something else might feel like they can enter into a dialogue with what Dennis and I presented. I feel like we didn't do a good job in facilitating those bridges. For example, when we presented to you guys the primer, we were so kind of neurotic, and I mean, between Dennis and I think we've lost a couple of weeks of sleep.
Yeah.
I've been having dreams about these diagrams and things. It's like terrible. So I'm sure the presentation was also a bit neurotic and kind of centered simply on learning how to speak about what we were doing. It's not necessarily, we didn't take the time to facilitate bridges with other things. And my impression, and this is something that I think John started his last presentation on, and that fits our group as well, this kind of wiki style of knowing that when you bring something to a network, you're also facilitating the connection with other nodes in the network, right? It's not just a matter of throwing something out there. You need to also kind of keep the ports on, easy for people to plug into it, right? Kind of almost like a Kantian ethics of present something in such a way that it can be referenced by someone else, right? I think that's something that is worth kind of making sure we've done the basis for that to be possible. Because like knowing where we're going concretely, I think it's kind of secondary in a way. Like there are many common interests that we might not even be able to fully articulate it. And, coming up with a weird tree like this is proof that we, like you might not know where we're going, but the number of connections is growing with time.
Mm-hmm.
Things are coming closer together. They're not going further apart, and it's not on purpose. So I think we can trust that if we present to each other, if we explore this kind of in-between topics that are personally interesting us, but also concerned with connecting with other researchers, right? And we keep that vague idea that there are some everything is very vague, right? There is some idea, like generally there is some goodwill towards formalisms. Organization seems to be a word that creates more agreement between us than disagreement. Like it is important in some way. I mean, there are many different topics that I was very surprised to see connections through absolutely different kind of philosophical perspectives, but suddenly, the Zizekian Hegelian approach and the Sellarsian approach were very similar when talking about nature, social relations from the perspective of organization. It brings something together. And then I think that idea of treating capitalism as a social formation that is not exhaustive, right, of the possible ways of describing collective association, that seems to be something that is also on the table as a common place. Like it's not really clear what it is, but perhaps it's okay. You know, as long as everyone feels like this helps to orient what we're gonna do next. You know, like my opinion, I'd much rather that you left the meeting, Reza, feeling like there's something that turns you on, that you want to talk about, and that you feel like you can contribute in like 3 months in the future. Don't need to be for tomorrow, no pressure, but that you feel like you can connect with the discussion and see your own work in a new light or shed a new light on what people are doing, like the next step. Then having the like this synoptic perspective on where the whole thing is heading, you know. So I think that we should clarify the best we can what we already have to each other, so that everyone feels like they can give a next step.
Mhm.
It doesn't contradict what you were saying, Reza, but I think that that kind of distributes amongst everyone here more tools, you know, to say, okay, I'll plan in 2 months' time to contribute with this. And then you can work on your time. It should be something pleasant if it's also a topic that interests you, you know?
I don't think anything you said is any different than what I said. It's just
Perfect. That's even better.
yeah, it's different emphasis on different aspects of things. I'm just
Sure.
saying that it would be probably, I'm saying that for my own benefit, it would be nice if somebody could tell me what was the gist of 2020 and all these 17 or 15 sessions that we spent. I mean, other than that diagram. I mean, that diagram is nice. I can take a look at it, but it would be good if Dennis could sit down and digest that all. And I'm just making an example, Dennis. I'm not putting you on the spot.
Yeah, just a little bit of effort required there.
Yeah.
to do that.
No, if I can help anybody, I'm willing to help. It's just I haven't been there. If you task me to go listen to this, and I think it is a good exercise.
I don't know. I mean, sorry, John. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to cut in real, because Dennis has something earlier about like how procedural we would be with, you know, do people have to mention 1, 2, and 3? And I think a lot of what you were saying, Gabriel, like to me, if there's anything procedural, it should be that we should really encourage people to make a point of directly referencing other people's research. And that, as opposed to forcing a condition where like the common comes out, that's actually a way that we can begin to like institutionally look at what's common by holding some kind of standard by how much we're referencing others' work, how much we're bringing into the talks, and really trying to make that, like if there is anything procedural, like I'm very skeptical about saying like how many references or something, but if there's something to look at to actually do to make the connections, I'm generally like, I think if we were to look at anything concrete to bring it all together, I'm much more excited about that idea of a panel where we could bring a bunch of different people and present a bunch of different ideas and then let the audience come away and ourselves with what's common. But I think there's so many moving pieces right now that outside of an exercise, which I think is great to try to generalize, I think as far as the strategic goal of building the group and spreading ideas out beyond the group, I'd much rather publishing different things or putting together a panel or coming up with some like way to get all these different things out rather than trying to condense all these different things into a single piece.
Diversify as opposed to unify.
I wouldn't say diversify as much as just like, I mean, people are clearly, like Gabriel saying, there are different interests, there are different things people are doing. And I think, I mean, so many meetings I've come into, the meetings start like they did today with people supporting each other and publishing texts. And here's some ideas. And why don't you reach to this guy? Well, we could take that just to the next level, which is, I understand, is basically how the Frankfurt School went about doing it, which is very intentionally quoting each other, referencing each other's works, like trying to build up a systematic, like, you know, body of people working together to represent this. And I think, you know, everyone here seems like a serious theoretician. That work is what will bring out what's common and what's different. Much more so, and in a way that will be much more rigorous and much more enticing to other people in the long run. I think things like manifestos, other than as exercises, which are totally relevant or totally valid in our own sense, should be like event-based. Like we have hit something that we're like, we have to share this with the world now. And I don't feel like we're at that. We're more in like, wow, this is really exciting, but we're not exactly sure what it is we can do with it. Gabriel and Dennis are going this way. JP went that way. I went another way. There are obviously connections, but there's obviously a lot of differences. And trying to methodologize how we interact with each other, how we refer to each other's works. That seems like a way to really build in practice what's common and what's different.
I really like what you are saying, John. It's just, I had a different idea what this research group is. But what you are saying makes sense. So it would be, like I said, I was under the impression that this is about doing a particular research on the question of the relation between politics and organization. That's this research group. Sure, I mean, if somebody is interested in category theory, we bring category theory in the context of how it helps the topic of politics and organization. If
How is that different from what John said?
Oh, what John says is this group is not the way that I'm hearing it, which I also like. It's a very good. This group does not have a main topic. This group is a forum for different discussions that people bring in those discussions that are in, and then we let the discussion form different focuses or centers, loci, and those each locus will become a trend on its own, but we don't define what the trend is. We let the discussions develop those trends.
I wouldn't say maybe that's how it came across. It's not what I meant. And I think kind of echoing this idea of like philosophers like to put things in text. I feel like a lot of times we lose track of the fact that like we're reaching commonly all kinds of consensus, agreements, understandings. I don't feel like we need to like put into paper the specific things that we agree on in order to guarantee agreement. I don't think if we don't write a manifesto, we're going to then go all these different kind of directions. I mean, it's pretty clear from the actual topics and meetings that there are shared interests that are drawing us together. I mean, I'm a very new member to this group, relatively speaking, and I came in because of the topics and the interests and the convergences and the way they fit together. Like, I don't have an interest in bringing up some completely ancillary topic that doesn't have any, like I feel like, again, like the institutionality of it does a lot for us that we don't then have to turn around and rely on a text to make sure we're actually
doing that's what I understood that you said. I think the only difference, Reza, from what he's proposing to what you're proposing is saying, rather than write a petition of principle or a main statement in a text, there are mechanisms for how we prepare and plan the meetings and relate the meetings that do a similar thing. Cross-referencing, having these meetings from time to time to just talk it out, or having other ways to kind of get some feedback, that already will help us keep in some path that has a lot to, it's very similar to as if we had a statement written. It's not the contrary to having a written statement, it's just a way that is more about the form of the group than having it kind of explicit somewhere. But I think it's just an alternative method, not an alternative purpose.
So it's more like a common way of working versus some common set of principles or theses or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that those things are inverse. I mean, honestly, if we go through the presentations, Reza said, can somebody summarize? I think we can summarize this. Not that difficult. It's not that difficult. It's not things are not so far off from each other. You know, it's just that things are quite infinite. So they can be totally separate and be very much in the same little corner of the world, right? So there is a lot of, we can do this now if you guys want. I think it would be perhaps even kind of useful, but I think it's
very useful to me.
yeah, I think that it's just a matter of like, again, let's think about the next step. Is the next step, does it require us to stop and write something? Does it require us to like be very kind of focused on making a clear synthesis of where we are before we move on? Or I think that's what is under discussion. It's not like, what is this group? Who are we? I think that, I mean, no, you don't even need to worry about that. It's pretty established, you know? Of course, we can make things clearer, we can clarify, we can kind of stop and say, okay, perhaps the best, like the most interesting thing to do now would be this, considering what just happened, right? For example, Renzo is here, and one thing that he said many times that I think it's really good is that we haven't really dedicated any meetings, practically any meetings, to more concrete political analysis, you know, like of a case study, of a political sequence. I mean, it's something that we're lacking. Definitely could see what happens. It would be a really good test to a lot of stuff here, to put it to the, you know, to the discussion of a concrete political situation. So for example, that could be a next step. And again, just because it's a next step doesn't mean one person needs to do it. There are many ways to approach it. Somebody can do something, somebody can do something else. Not everyone needs to present on this. It can be something slightly unrelated or difficult to see the connection, and then later on we will see. Again, I think like we have all these proposals for future ideas. I think it's easy, and if we go very quickly over what we've done, for the sake also of, I don't know, putting Reza up to speed, but also all of us, because I think it's already too much. So perhaps it would be good to just try to go over the stuff. I think all of these become quite motivated. It's easy to see how they are motivated, and perhaps some of them can be rethought a bit, or new ideas could appear. But neither in synthesizing nor in proposing the next steps, I think we need like a very clear statement of, you know, like for example, if we take like this outline here, we know that it's very similar to this, right? The text we published in Crisis and Critique is like an expanded version of this part here. Add all the added material to the published text came from the previous meetings, pretty much, with the exception of something Caron had published and that he summarized as well. Everything else was like summaries of this other stuff, right? So I mean, if we start here, I think we can cover pretty much what we've done. Like there was very early on this meeting here, which was just Raquel, Dennis, and I. You guys correct me if I remember something wrong, but from what I remember, it was a meeting about, it was the first meeting where we discussed Marx. We discussed what could we bring to the table in terms of rereading Marx, and especially this thing called the transformation problem, which is an issue in the third volume of Capital, and that usually it's read like a technical problem of the relation between value and price. But one thing that we kind of bonded over, was the idea that it's also very important point about what it means for things to be represented in capitalism. So the transformation problem has a way of being understood, like we can approach it as if it is, let's say, the theory of prices in the third volume of Capital, and what Marx calls the Trinitarian formula, is kind of like the theory of immanent representation of capitalism. It's like how capital represents itself to its own world, right? Something like this. So we started discussing this. I think this was one of the first researches. Dennis presented something on Illy Adams, and I think that it was very useful though we definitely extrapolated what it like from the thesis. It had this, at least for me, it was very useful because it was a presentation of emergent effects that is not a function of nonlinear or dynamical systems. You had a theory of how something can emerge as a unmotivated effect, right? An effect that doesn't seem to have a determinate cause from the interaction between systems, rather than a sort of emergent property of a dynamical system or something. And again, there was an idea of effects that lose information, so they hide their own cause. It was a discussion that we had on how this theory of compositionality, right? This sort of logical approach to the idea of parts and wholes, how that could be useful and how it related, for example, to things we saw in Badiou. Like retroactively, I would even say that this is where, for me at least, it became clear that there was a middle ground between what Badiou talks about in terms of stable or static worlds and his theory of change, which is very radical, right? Like strong points and so on. Suddenly there was a way to talk about some other ways of things changing that weren't really covered by Badiou. Renzo did two really cool presentations on integrated information theory of consciousness, and a lot of stuff I think we covered. I think were two of the most dense presentations we had, right? At this point, I think that the common issue here in the three meetings was already the issue of scale, because here the transformation problem is already happening at the level of analysis of capitalism that takes into consideration like total social capital, average of profit rates, and it's like a large scale view. And it's very much a problem of how the large scale capital analysis is projected onto a small scale of capitalists. We also used veils to talk about resolution, right? The generative, that concept that Adams presents on veiling. We used it to talk about resolutions and how one thing can be lost as an information from one scale to another. This led us to talk about Eric Hull's work on the relation between small scale and large scale systems that Renzo mobilized in his presentation as well. And we also talked about a kind of compositional approach, right, with all those ways of measuring complexity through partitioning of a network, which I think for me, it was one of the things that most kind of struck me, and I really wanted us, in fact, to get back to. We even made some crazy comments about how to use this sort of idea when discussing like strikes and other forms of interruption of a social network, right, like a city or something. Then I think that there was another meeting before the space and logic, but then there were two meetings that I thought were also really good, because we were pretty much talking about this. I think it was a reality check, couple of meetings, because we were doing all this speculative discussions on composition, mentioning topology and category theory, and like those ideas that some of us had read in Badiou, and then Yasha kind of put those things in place, and they suddenly appeared 10 times more complicated than they seemed before. I mean, actually, we covered a lot in those two meetings, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not going.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
Yes.
That was my first meeting, and I'm still digesting it.
Yeah, let me just see something here. Yeah, it was at the end of the second one that we went into models, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that, I mean, you covered a ridiculous amount, but I mean, it was our Dennis had some of us had participated in the Badiou group, so we had the first crash course on the Ioneda lemma, but then we had a second, definitely a much crashier course on the Ioneda lemma.
The course that crashed us.
A course that crashed. But a lot of stuff was introduced more on the formal side here.
When was this?
This was on September.
In
end of
October.
September,
So
in
Yeah,
October.
okay.
If I'm not mistaken, there was something here was intercalated as well. I think that 7, 14, 21. No, yeah. Renzo presented, then Yasha.
When I click on this, it says error 403. It seems that you don't belong here.
What?
Probably sign in
When you click where?
on the slides. Maybe I've signed off. So let me sign back in.
Yeah, it's here. Yeah, we were, this is crucial. Like at this time here, one of the ideas that appeared in the first meeting with Raquel and something that we spoke very quickly about, which I think was a very, very important insight that we didn't develop directly anymore afterwards, but was this idea that we can, one way we can talk about money as a universal equivalent, but as a poorer form for it, was with the ultrafilters discussion, principal and non-principal ultrafilters, right? I remember drawing many times that idea of you have like many regions of space and whatever, and we're talking about money as a sort of thing that every region covers. It covers every region, right? A sort of singleton for the social space versus this sort of enigmatic idea of what if you could cover consistently a social space with something that shares no singleton, right? Again, very loosely discussed. And then again, Yasha gave us a bit of a reality check, like, yeah, you want to see what ultrafilter looks like. There's a reason why it's called ultra. And
Yeah.
Yasha, I cannot access your first set of slides.
Oh, the first one? Right,
Yeah.
click it, Gabriel. Oh, well, I'll try to fix that. I still
yeah,
have
I
the
think it's
PDF.
linked as a Dropbox. It's not linked on our.
Oh,
folder.
that's probably my bad. I can fix that. I'll do it.
And I think that at the same time, like just after this, right? This was 12th of October. On the 14th, Dennis and I gave our first attempt at a presentation on how to use logics of growth to formalize the first chapters of Capital, right? At that time, we were naive young people. My beard wasn't white yet, as it is now, after my life has been sucked by this attempt. But it was our first attempt at showing that there were some parallels, that the formalism could be used, and good ideas could come from that mixture, right? I think that just after this, so this is 20th of October, on the 2nd of November, we had a discussion on how to summarize all of this. So I remember it was a very nice meeting. In fact, if you go to this YouTube video, it's very, I think, useful, where we try to kind of talk about all this stuff, right? I think there's one meeting I didn't comment on, which is this one, which is one where I tried very ambitiously to summarize Karatani's theory of modes of exchange, how you could kind of start thinking about modes of exchange as kind of transcendental of worlds to, again, mix it with Badiou, right? And in this meeting, we kind of went over all of this. We talked about, let's start reading Bogdanov. I think that's when we decided that we should have a common reading, right? And after this, I presented, I think, next on the stuff on organization that I had published with a friend. It already used the stuff that we did. So I used in my research with this guy in this publication, the theory, Karatani's theory that we can treat different modes of exchange as different logics that are mixed together. I used things that I discussed with Raquel and Dennis about the problem of representing the totality of capitalism to individuals in capitalism itself. Some of these ideas from Badiou and Marx, this idea of the Badiou approach to novelty as a more experimental expansion of possibilities rather than a critique was also here. So this was like a long presentation, I remember. Then after this, we read the first, like we had our first collective reading of Bogdanov, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this is 16. And then Dennis presented a very kind of heterogeneous mixture, if I remember correctly, Dennis, like of some stuff coming from microeconomics, right? Like price curves and how is it called, like the effective demand?
Yeah. I already forgot. Something like the way you calculate from a bunch of different demand curves. Competitive equilibrium, right? Using Edgeworth's boxes.
Yeah.
This was a messy presentation.
One thing that we need to say, if nothing else works, just the sheer development of Dennis's presentations, like, look at this. Like, who cares if it's right or useful? Like, how pretty is this?
I have a future as an artist of confusing.
The artist of confusing thoughts.
Did you guys say that the presentation on 11th of February is the recap?
2nd of November.
2nd of November. Oh, sorry. So this is the international. It's not American. So 2nd of November.
Yeah, we
not
summarized
11th of
everything
February,
that came
2nd
up
of
to this
November.
point, right? Everything
Okay,
that before this
gotcha.
line was discussed in that meeting.
Gotcha.
So at
Actually,
that point,
I'm a little bit sorry. I'm a little bit overdue. I had some commitment at 8 o'clock. I have to go. So did we achieve anything in this meeting?
I love that you asked for this, and then in the middle of it, you say, "Have we gotten anywhere?"
No, sorry.
No,
I mean,
probably no, Reza. Probably we didn't.
too many commitments. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just sure. No, I guess we did.
I asked for something and you're providing it, and in the middle of it, I'm leaving.
Yeah. Anyway, just
Reza, we're trying.
yeah, we're trying.
We'll see.
Reza.
We'll let you know.
Okay. So
Wait. Oh no, go ahead.
no, so for the next session, which I'm planning to also attend, do we have an agenda or we don't?
No, probably I mean, the idea is to just finish going over what we did and then see who wants to present next, if there are any ideas on what to present next and things.
And I'm also a little bit embarrassed, guys. I not only have not participated in your presentation, I haven't done anything. So kudos to you, all of you guys. It's just awesome. It's awesome, man. I'm really proud to be associated with this group. So congratulations. It's a great amount of landscape that you guys have covered.
Reza, you mentioned you had some
Thank you, Reza.
research topic that you were working on privately, right?
Well, I suggested that a while back, but the idea did not stick. I wanted to get into more the elements of the axiomatic method. So start from Lautman and go forward. So I wanted to basically present some topics on Lautman. I kind of went away from that because of everything else that I had to do in 2020. It was a very busy year for me. But that was what I suggested. But I think it was a little bit off topic, or we deemed to be off topic at the time. And also,
I think it
Dennis,
would work. I think it
Yeah,
would work.
nobody
we
was
have-
against it. No.
Yeah.
no, I know nobody was against it. We just felt that it's probably not in the mainstream of the discussions, but it may be now. So I would be more than glad to get a date and then work towards it and present it in a couple of couple of
can I give you
sessions.
a suggestion, Reza,
Hmm.
since you need to go? In the first presentation that Caron did recently, on the 15th of February,
Mhm, mhm.
he started talking about Reza's text and Reza's book, Intelligence and Spirit. And in it, Reza talks about this idea of truth candidates
Mhm.
as a sort of more pragmatic version of axioms, pretty much,
Mhm.
right? That's something that, I mean, since there were methodological discussions on how to bridge or differentiate or kind of set down distinctions, I mean, that's definitely something that you could cross-reference, you know, like if you take that and take the axiomatic method you're interested in, that in itself would give just the comparison would surely advance your own research and also help us to kind of cover ground on, okay, how to come up with a common language or to navigate those two traditions, you know?
Mhm. Sure. I just did not. I have taken a look at that. One question that I have now, it's good that JP left. I don't know where Reza stands in terms of, I mean, how valid what he's saying is at this time. But if you think that he's a serious contributor and we want to pay attention, by all means, I'm willing
Yeah, I
to
think
do that.
Caron did practically 2 presentations on his work. Like he's very much into it. So surely
I would
he's
love
better.
to see. I would love to see a Reza
That's why
versus
I'm
evil
glad-
Reza
Yes.
fight.
That's why I'm glad that Caron left when I asked that question.
Reza, you should do a whole presentation on it. That should be
What question I missed? What's going on?
He's doing a presentation. You'll see all about it.
It's called Reza versus evil Reza.
Okay, yeah, no, that's okay. Reza knows he's evil. I mean, the other Reza.
I mean, it's even good because in some video games, like the negative version is the nega, right?
Yeah.
So you would have the Reza and the nega Rastani, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we have the both. We both have same initials.
The Mecha Godzilla, the Mecha Reza is
Yes, the combination of the two. would be-
Mecha Rastani. There's a Mecha Rastani.
Yeah.
No, I was just saying, yeah, that I thought that one way to combine the thing that Reza wanted to study with stuff that we already covered would be to connect.
Yeah. I watched that bit about truth
Right.
candidates. And all that. Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps there's something there. I mean, I feel like this is definitely a useful topic in many ways. Like, is there a pragmatic interpretation or a pragmatic dimension to the axiomatic method, for example?
Yeah. So
that is something that interests me a lot. This is something I have in common with good Reza.
okay. Sorry, guys. Let me just understand who is good here. Which one of the good one? I got confused a little bit.
We'll find out after your presentation.
Presentation.
So the jury is still not out. Okay. So probably I have to listen to what you presented, and probably I reach out to you,
could just
JP.
skip to the chapter. I mean, this is the final chapter on Intelligence and Spirit. It's already like a 100-page read, but there is a specific part there. I mean, the introduction to the 8th chapter of Intelligence and Spirit is all about this truth candidate approach that he takes from a guy called Rescher. What's the first name? It's like a philosopher of science, something that influenced this other philosopher that he likes a lot, which is Lawrence Puntel. which is a name that keeps popping up here, but it's kind of unrelated to the research really. But
I read a little bit of Puntal. I liked him actually. He's
yeah.
he's a very robust.
Reza Negarestani, he's very attached to the Puntelian approach. Yeah.
Okay. So,
So
is anybody up to speed with Puntal?
Keep going
That-
back and forth. Just a sec. Go on.
I was just asking if anybody is up to speed with Puntal, can give us a presentation of what he actually says. I read probably, he has a big book, you guys probably have seen it,
Yeah.
about 300-400 pages. I read about 80 pages. I liked parts of it, but it was a little bit too dense.
Yeah, I
for-
mean, again, I think that you have a good way of slicing it. You know, if you're interested in the history of this axiomatic method, the axiomatic method already popped up in our discussions, and that question was raised. Like, isn't this idealism? Isn't it arbitrary? You know, in opposition to a more perhaps pragmatic approach that takes on hypotheses but approaches them in a different way. So there is a bunch of stuff that could be. Yeah, but you could present, like, this is something that is a good example. It could be a next step that cross-references your research with that of others, but it still gives you a lot of leeway to present whatever you want. And it would be useful because there is a debate already going on. Like, the reason why I'm trying to make these short summaries is just to show two things at once, right? It's very broad. We could be presenting, I mean, just take what Dennis did with open gains, sheaves, and prices. Like, any presentation on microeconomics at this point would be useful. Any presentation on gain semantics would touch on this. Any presentation on category theory, there are so many connections, you know, that you could make. So it's guiding, but not really limiting in any strong sense. But I think it's good just to, you know, and the second point is that when you look retroactively, some common clusters do appear, right? Methods of talking about complexity, issues of scaling, as we talked about, you know, different ways that organization pops up in these discussions. The issue of the theory of money and the theory of social mediation. All these things are not necessarily on purpose, but they are starting to appear as kind of repetitions, right?
Yeah, well, sorry, I have folks here waiting for me.
No, sure, go there. We've given you a mission.
Yeah, so I'll try to reach JP and collect some material and put some thoughts together, and we'll discuss.
Yeah, my idea is, my suggestion is, think of a date, not now, but like in the next few days. Imagine like 2 months' time you're presenting something. So you can also come up with a schedule, plan yourself, you know, to slowly work on it. Like, it's helpful as well, you know, rather than wait until the thoughts are kind of formed to propose something.
That's a good idea. Okay, let me think about it. Probably I have something for you guys. You can put me down tentatively for, like you said, 2 months from now. It would be.
Yeah, I'll just write it down here so I can talk about it later.
We know beforehand that the axiomatic method will win. So in that fight.
There isn't that. There isn't that much mystery.
So Dennis, I still don't know which one is me.
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah,
That's the
we'll find
question,
out.
okay.
Is the axiomatic method the evil one? The
Okay.
evil one.
Thank you, guys.
See you, Reza.
Take
Yeah,
care.
take care.
Bye, JP.
Bye. Bye.
We can call Reza Estani, and the other is the Nega Restani. Like Restani and Nega Restani.
So it does seem like one way to kind of summarize down a lot of that is, instead of asking like, is any given presentation on topic, does it fit within a delimited field of things? It's more a question of, does this connect, and how can I connect something?
Yeah,
What
I think.
ways can I bring it in, and do I think it will be interesting? I mean, that does seem to be something that hasn't been explicitly said, but everyone does seem, I mean, that's a real question too, right?
Yeah, I really think that, I mean, I kind of think it's worth saying this because fuck, we're going through a pandemic. Everyone is overworked. Everyone has other commitments. Like if we don't take care, like conscious care of creating space that the research that really kind of excites you has some way of feeding into this. We can't feed off your actual energy, you know, to do stuff into forwarding this. Like we need to borrow that excitement, right? So it's good to make sure that everyone feels like, okay, I fit into this somehow. That's what I'm kind of, I think that this kind of more wiki approach is good, you know, like, dude, if you can reference, you know, even if it's not like you're gonna quote, but if you can just connect and talk about or, you know, see some overlap, it's kind of enough, right? It will make the thematic connections sort themselves out in a way, right? True, it's good. I think that's, for example, looking backwards, I do feel like there are some things that it's almost like you can make yourself a vessel for the research itself by, if you look like a detective into the totality and say, it's clear that this thing is not touching on that thing, but they could. And then you purposefully make a short circuit. Like you can try to push it forward and it might work on purpose. But if you don't, and you just want to present what you're working on and try to make those local, how is it that Apolito calls it? Like instruments of connection and instruments of complexity, right? Instruments of connection are just like locally looking at this dimension. Can I make sure that others can reference what I did, and can I reference what others are doing? And I think instruments of complexity are actually trying to enrich it, the level of connection. So you can purposefully try to increase it, you know, by referencing everything and try to mix everything together, but you don't need to. So with, I mean, the rest of this stuff here, more recent, right? I think that after Dennis, we had that really cool presentation that Caron did also with Pedro on Evans tags, and we started kind of creating a clearer kind of framework to include a more normative approach to some of the topics. So political economy was kind of evoked, but now talking in terms of spaces of reasons, concepts, ways of seeing the world as, right, sort of a hypothesis that you can kind of frame the theory of value as a theory of how to see the world as value, right? I think that's part of what Evans is proposing. I mean, I'm simplifying if you guys want to correct me. Then we had those 3 presentations on the primer. The first one was a total mass, and then the second and the third, I think we managed to make it a bit more clear, but it's a lot of stuff to unpack there. One of the things, I think 2 things that are already in the, like from this list here, I think that the idea of presenting further stuff is obviously connected to that, but what John did on the logistics and the kind of state perspective was clearly connected to it as well. We were talking about, okay, there is an underdeveloped dimension in the primer about what is the transcendental of the state, how to formalize it, think through it, and I think you're the one who actually kickstarted that connection, right? And Thiago also proposed, after the first presentation we did on the primer, that he would present something on the reciprocity transcendental. So these 2 things clearly also connect, even though they could clearly go elsewhere, right? But they are kind of extracting some ideas from or sharing some common ground with the primer. This thing here, I think that is something that Yasha and I already said last year we wanted to do, which has to do with presenting something from like a summary or discussion on Laurent Natal's book on scale relativity and how he thinks this idea, right? I don't know, Caron, like here, do you have already a content? Like I added this, but I forgot if this is already specific thing you guys want to develop on top of what you're already.
Actually, yes. I was thinking of going with Mark Wilson, but I have a different hypothesis now, which I would like to test sometime, which might surprise you. Like I would like to make one or a couple of presentations on Gianotti, like trabalho, reflexão, and
Whoa.
apresentação. Yeah, this is kind of radical, right? Like, it's a Brazilian philosopher who went from Marxism to Wittgensteinism, and through the problem of value, like how does value emerge from a social practice? This was the main problem of Trabalho e Reflexão, his first big book, like Work and Reflection, some Labor and Reflection would be the translation. Of course, I will translate every quote and everything. And then he thought of, the linguistic dimension as a bigger framework than capital itself, wherein value comes out of specific practices emerges from specific practices as criteria, the criteria of the practices themselves. So I think there is something very interesting there going on in Gianotti. He's a kind of bad boy in Brazil because he went to the center-right in the political spectrum. He's not a Marxist anymore, and he's not committed to left politics anymore. As our former president, like Fernando Henrique Cardoso, like he was part of the same milieu. But I think that arch from 80s, 70s, 80s Gianotti to 90s Gianotti, there's something very precious to my research there. I'm starting to see it, and I think there is something very interesting because it is about the emergence of value as a means of measure. So this concerns very interestingly, I mean, Dennis's and Gabriel's research as well, and that might shed some light on the different ways to construe this emergence from the more topological Badiouian framework to the more normative Wittgensteinian or Wittgenstein-like or something like that framework.
So I mean, I had the Mark Wilson thing here that you said you and Pedro would like to present. So
yes, we'll do this. We'll do this together. But I have this individual one about Gianotti.
I love this. This is so polemical. This is very juicy.
Very fuck. I mean, the gringos here don't see how polemical. Yes, I love this book actually, Raquel. I mean, the gringos don't see how polemical this shit is, And I mean, Raquel and Gabriel, please bring over, all the Paulo Arantes objections and all that.
No, Paulo Arantes actually quoted recently that's Gianotti's most promising work. That it was never fully realized. Like he likes it. His
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting this thing. And then he went to this little book about the game of the beautiful. I mean, yeah, whatever. But that arch from labor and reflection to presentation of the world is this book. This Wittgensteinian book actually is called Presentation of the World. It's almost the Badiouian overtones there are quite striking, but from a completely different framework. It's quite interesting, the cross relationships that can be drawn from this. So this is something I'm obviously very, very excited about. So
no, that's amazing. So, do you think you could already kind of think of a time framework?
Yeah, like 1 month. In 1 month, I may be able to.
So I'll put here after mid-April, and then we can see, we can try to fit things together later. As for the Mark Wilson stuff, guys, do you want to put it after this? Like, do you want to, or just leave it open for now?
I don't know. That's up to Pedro. I think this is more. I mean, I've been reading Mark Wilson for quite some time. It's not very difficult to put together, I think, but.
Yeah, I also think that we can come up with something like short notice for this, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
What?
What time periods do you think we should?
I mean, like like, I don't know, like maybe 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, maybe something like that. Let me see what
Yeah.
I have. Yeah, let me see when this is happening. Yeah, like end of March.
Yeah.
How about not 2 weeks? Maybe it's too short notice. Maybe 3 weeks from now.
Like
that
the
okay?
first week of
First week
April, you mean?
April. Yeah.
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
that sounds good.
yeah.
And then I'll just move the next one. So-
And then you could push a little bit the Gianotti to end of April or something like
Okay.
that, so, or beginning of May, something like that. Yeah.
But it's probably good that they're not too far apart since they do
Yeah,
share.
they won't be. They won't be.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of time, right? That the scheduling that they're kind of close.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I understand what you mean.
Pedro, you said you wanted to prepare something like simple to discuss that banana
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we can do something like similar to what we're doing now, where there isn't like slides or anything, and we can just sort of like go. I can sort of like summarize a little bit my criticism of the text and sort of like
Mhm.
think about how we would sort of, yeah, think about like what like actually algorithmic socialism is. And I think that there's like some like cool dumb ideas coming up in relation to like crypto stuffs that like somehow are like vaguely related to it, and we could definitely talk a little bit about this. I think it's something that's like, yeah, pretty like something chill, but kind of getting into the text.
I'll just put here, chill vibes on
Yeah, exactly.
vibing to algorithm.
Yeah, vibing with algorithmic
Vibing with-
socialism.
We like
Like,
to
we
vibe with
could-
algorithms.
Yeah, like we could just like start a Twitch account and get like some gamers into it. Like I'm sure we could.
Okay, so let's do like we can. I mean, do you want to do this next week?
Yeah, we can do that next week for sure. Yeah.
I mean, it would be. I'll just. I'll just. You know where the Benanav text is then, just so we can.
Yeah, I have it saved. I can send you guys.
Yeah, just so
again.
everyone reads the things to be criticized.
Yeah, cool.
Renzo, I mean, you said you wanted. Could you talk a bit more about the thing you wanted to?
Yeah, I'm not sure yet how to go about it, like conceptually, but I guess the idea is I've been thinking of ways on. It seems that we kind of like develop this organizational point of view, which helps to think about how like more stable forms of organization are like constituted and how they kind of, and it all, like our framework helps to think them within this larger space of like social forms. But I think there's a more like synchronic, diachronic dimension of how certain like organizations, like taken in like broad terms, like the movement, like a movement and an organization, how do they fit in a certain like sequence? So I feel like there are cases in which the same organization can serve different roles in a certain like struggle. So take, for example, a union in different moments and in different places may serve both to kind of like advance a certain like organization of the class, etc. But in other moments, it represents a kind of like moment of integration with the state, a moment of kind of forms of that the state finds to mediate and kind of pacify whatever was being created. So I was thinking of how within this organizational, so I was first wondering whether this kind of more organizational point of view is, as an orientation of thinking, is something different from an orientation that's situated more on the point of view of struggle, of like class struggle and social struggle, whether these two things are like different. Because I feel that in the first case, the question of like the duration of the organization is kind of like the basis of like thinking about forms and stable forms and new forms. And on the other hand, like thinking about from the point of view of struggle, what you're kind of like, the origin is not so much about like the organizations that remain, but more about like this notion of the advancement of class struggle in some social struggle in some sense, like in a certain new origin of conflict or of, you know, like disintegration of capitalistic forms. So and I think this, like, it's, for me, it appears a lot in like political experience, like currently, like different approaches to how to think about like the role of organizations like parties, unions, and this sort of stuff. And then one way I thought about how to think about it was whether the concept of management, and which is something that comes from like the business and state discourse, but also comes from like more like autonomy traditions of like thinking about what self-management of or self-activity means. So there's this zone where you have to distinguish which sort of management of a political movement or a political organization, what sort of meaning that takes in terms of like it being working towards like integrating the organization into the state, into like being observed on like capitalistic dimensions, or being a sort of like management of something new that is in an antagonism with what is given. And so I was thinking about like ways to formalize this, like with dynamical systems and some models of like that I've studied before with like Ising models and the form, this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's kind of, I don't know how to go.
Well, it seems like it's a crucial thing. Like I thought, I kind of, for me, it seems to clear the point, right? That we don't, I mean, this whole discussion on organization, it's weird that it seems very much more kind of practical than, for example, value theory, like this sort of abstract economical point of view, but it also doesn't seem to make it obvious how class struggle comes into the picture, right? I think that you're totally right that this issue of, for example, when is the duration of an organization a useful orientation, and when is just serving a sort of managerial, kind of managing a crisis sort of role, right? It's very true, but like, do you want to keep it open and see, like, if you want to develop it more before presenting? Would you rather like put it on the calendar and seeing what comes up?
Yeah, maybe I can try and like, but probably I need a couple of months, and then I can bundle kind of like some ideas and try to present and discuss without guaranteeing too much kind of like coherence. So I'd say in terms of time, maybe 2 months, something like that.
Sure. Yeah, you guys don't need to.
Yeah, 2 or 3 months.
Or so, just so we can, just so we can start kind of coming up with an idea of where we're heading, right? I mean, I really think that this is something that perhaps we could do a testing, kind of a test ground for that concern before, because one thing that Dennis and I are going to do soon is that we want to start working on the second part of the primer, which should be more about the use of all that machinery for organization than anything else, right? So we thought about discussing the venture commune and trying to bring it, kind of absorb it into this approach. We thought about some other stuff. I think that this could probably be like we could think of something as a kind of just to discuss these ideas beforehand that could touch on the stuff that you mentioned, you know. But I don't think we have a very clear idea, right? That is on like what kind of short kind of or kind of specific step we could take in terms of presentations of.
Yeah, it seems like there's a missing middle step that we need to do before we can move on to the next text. And I think it has to do with, well, we've established this logic of the capitalist world, right? And now how do we distinguish this? Because we have, obviously we'll have predicates, we'll have a different set of predicates in other social contexts. So then, but what is really distinguishing things? Is it just like a matter of constraints, different constraints, but the same kind of language, or like what makes a different logic? I think, and this is where I think that social struggle aspect is important.
Yeah, the one thing that I think we can contribute that perhaps could be a good kind of step in that direction is that, I mean, objective phenomenology also implies that, let's say, struggle doesn't, like, it's not obvious at which level or at which kind of resolution you can see struggle, right? So for example, you can have social struggle happening at a level where there is no individual tension between people, but you have tension at a different level, or vice versa, right? You can have a very antagonistic situation with absolutely no, let's say, structural antagonism, or you can have a situation with immediate tensions and very harmonious structure in the background. I think that objective phenomenology implies, right, as a method, that we should distinguish, again, struggle for us, right, from a sort of objective tension between different logics, right? I think that's kind of a weird topic that I haven't really seen discussed very much. And it seems like it's something that we'll have to account for, right?
Yeah, because there is a way of mapping social struggles into capitalism as the struggle between agents in a game, like competitive.
Yeah.
There you have that whole like like just fighting over resources, fighting over just another version of capital, different capitals fighting each other, right?
In the marketplace of ideas.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good example.
So I don't know, I can see connections there, you know, like one thing that I I think that this is also a point where we could, I mean, in between those steps that we need to take, the thing that Renzo just mentioned, you know, I think that, for example, we thought of bringing examples from like the venture commune and trying, I've been collecting some material from organizers during the pandemic, that some groups like Notes from Below and other organizations, they're producing a lot of kind of reports on, you know, current political processes that have been going on. I thought if we could do like a discussion based on some concrete case study. I remember Enzo also mentioned this before, if it wouldn't be good to look at some political sequence. So in between the stuff that we need to do for continuing the work on the primer, the question of social struggle and organization, perhaps some of these case study stuff could also fit there. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I was reading the text you sent by Toscano, and and it was actually a dialogue, right, with the people from. There are some replies,
Yeah, from
and
Viewpoint, right?
no, the from EndNote.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, and I think it might also be interesting because it touches on questions of logistics, but it also appears this discussion about the reconfiguration thesis by Toscano. It's criticized by EndNotes in terms that kind of like turn around the idea of revolt against the idea of kind of like the revolt as merely like sabotage and interruption and destruction, and uh, a different image that Toscano tries to propose of kind of like repurposing existing infrastructure.
Hmm.
and I don't know, maybe that's a kind of like fights around like logistics but also transport. They could be like a
Yeah, I
potential.
really like that idea. I think it's because one thing that I really I don't know, I have an intuition. I think one of the meetings Caron was presenting, we even spoke of this. I have an intuition that if we take if we take a closer look at a political process, it's actually it can be interestingly sliced in terms of different parts of this research. Because, for example, there's a lot of the discussion on normativity, space of reasons, use of concepts that I think might actually find very concrete kind of use in discussing, how people speak about political processes that they're engaged in. How do people kind of conceive the stuff that they're engaged in, and what is the sort of kind of opaque parts of it, and how it's presented, and so on. At the same time, that there is this other part of the research that is, I feel like there is a underlying theme that we haven't really taken, like putting to focus, but is this idea that once you have a kind of scale sensitive approach, that debate you just mentioned, right, between, for example, is revolt like sabotage out of like spontaneous, is it kind of the spontaneity versus organization debate 2.0, right? Is this new form of politics, which is more like revolt without sort of institutional background or party politics or even social movement, is that a sort of unstructured form that is kind of the point of a transition period and whatever? Or is it something that is connected to new forms of structuring? Like when you have a more scale sensitive approach, you can talk about, let's say, structure of movements that only appear from very afar, and like that are very kind of, that have this weird intransitive aspect, that when you're inside of it, it looks very random or like outbursts. But when you take a weird perspective, like point of view from the outside, from far away, you can see that these movements are more consistent than it looks, So perhaps that sort of concrete case study approach could bring all of those ideas to discussion. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really have an example to develop, but yeah, that might be interesting to do something like that.
I think that we could come up with a material for this, that's not like just a historical description, something a bit more fresh. It would be good to think about at least,
Yeah, like something recent.
Yeah.
I mean, for Brazilians, like 2013 might be a candidate, something like this. I mean, or maybe Occupy 2011. I don't know, something that I know John is very familiar with. Seems, not sure. We have to think about it.
Yeah, I think the Yellow Vest in France, a lot of material was produced around it,
yeah.
and I think it's more representative of a contemporary thread, even than June, perhaps,
Yeah, it's
I
already.
don't know what you think, Renzo.
In a sense, it's already old, isn't it? Yeah, that's true. I mean, 2013.
Yeah, I do think there's a resonance across all these. I mean, they are all revolts centered around like circulation of people and goods, and
Yeah.
like you have Chile also that there it also started from a rise in the tickets. In France, it was the price of gasoline. We
Gas,
had
yeah.
also
It
like
was a gas tax, yeah.
the strike in Brazil. We also had the strike of the bus
Caminhoneiros, yeah.
caminhoneiros, yeah, the truck
Truck
drivers.
Yeah.
So I think there's this kind of like, if you look from a far away and on this like longer scale, there's certainly like a resonances.
Yeah, true.
But
Yeah,
I
so
don't know,
the-
in that case, I don't know what kind of like, the structure of what type of presentation it would for like more concrete cases.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, we can think about it. I don't know. I remember when I mean, a very old thing, but when you read like that Linhart book, I remember you mentioning like, why don't we kind of take historical situation? Like, I don't know, perhaps we could like meet at some point and just talk it over, see if we can come up with something.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's see. I mean, I don't think we have a clear idea here, but I think it's a good. I know John also wanted to talk about like last time we spoke of like taking some more large scale geopolitical movements also that he already studied and we could look over. One thing that I think is very concrete. Thiago is not here. I'm gonna ask. I know he was preparing something. Perhaps he has a time frame we can use. But Yasha, I mean, we're already agreeing on meeting next weekend, right? To talk about
Yeah, we
Natal.
could probably get that done in a few weeks, I would assume.
Yeah, I think so too. Like perhaps early April, like 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, that's probably a good time frame to aim for.
And it's kind of good because if me and Pedro, we are presenting the Mark Wilson thing, that might be a good complement.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be like a scale, the scaling month.
Month of scale. April's the month of scale.
The month of scale. Yeah. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I mean, when we put it in order there and just try putting dates next week, then we can do the fine arrangement of order. But one thing that touches on this then is, I'm not sure what you think, but when we met last time, like I think on Sunday, we had a very, I think we had a nice breakthrough in our last meeting about how to connect the idea of surplus value, the idea of what were the three things we put in the same kind of formal?
Yeah, it was like surplus value, partial worker, and cooperation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I really think that there is something very specific, like to this triad, that we could perhaps do just one presentation on it, because it is I think one of the most kind of weird, but in a good way, one of the weirdest things about the stuff we've been doing is treating labor as a logical category, right, and not as an ontological capacity. It has to do with that Bogdanov thing of, okay, give precedence to organization. Perhaps labor is a type of organization or something like this. But I think last time when we were talking about this, because we're still having trouble, Yasha knows, we're talking about it, we're still having trouble kind of pinning down how to express this idea that labor time, socially necessary labor time, and things like this, that they can be conceived in more logical ways. But suddenly, I think we had a good idea on how to kind of create a more continuous approach from labor time to the sort of decomposition of the laborer into smaller parts of their own actions, right? In the sort of Charles Chaplin factory work, meaningless factory work kind of abstraction of the body, right? Where the body starts to count as like smaller actions that don't make sense to, in themselves, to the point of where you could introduce the organizational point of view as something that is not a necessarily capitalist way of looking at actions, like, but as a continuum that goes from labor time all the way to cooperation. I think that that would be a really good meeting, like just focusing on that would make a really good meeting, you know?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of consequences.
Yeah, exactly. And I was wondering if we couldn't try that out and try to already push it a bit, because if you make that triad, right, of labor time is a way of splitting labor into this totally ordered parts, right, which you divide like a bunch of actions into the time that it takes to complete those actions, and in that way you can actually compare different labors, right? So you create a metric for different labors. But Capital goes further, and it creates a way to actually not only split already existing actions into slots of time, but actually split work itself into previously unknown actions, right? Once you have labor time as a measure, you can actually create new atoms of work. You can create meaningless actions that nobody ever thought of, like turning half a screw, right? So it's a weird way of decomposing work in such a way that the worker is no longer the totality, the totalizer of an action, but it's actually what Marx calls the partial worker. And then we saw that with the same principle, you can talk about cooperation, which is, again, something Marx himself does, which is to say, okay, but being the part of a totality that is not given by the worker himself is not only something that manufacturers or industrial capital does, but it's also the principle of cooperation, where your local, you're decomposed into parts of a whole that is not really your perspective, right? So there is a weird continuum between these ideas. And I think that is underlying that is also a continuum between labor, work, right? Work in the physical sense of energies, expenditure, and so on. Labor in the economic sense, and organization as this broader concept. Like, I think we could push it a bit, you know, and perhaps look at Rosen really quickly, see if we can connect it with something else. You know, I think it could be a good meeting that doesn't really need to be like far off in the future even, you know?
Yeah, I'm excited to do that. Yeah, I also wanted to suggest, but I think it falls under this. I wanted to give a quick summary of that text on behavioral mereology.
That would be amazing.
Oh yeah, I was interested in that too, Dennis. If you want to do that together, possibly.
Yeah, I think it would be a
I'd be
great.
open to that.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this text. It has everything to do with the primer, but also has everything to do with this next topic that we're talking about, with breaking up work into, because it's a problem of constraints, right? Like this meaningless activity, or this activity that taken out of context would be meaningless, is obeying some kind of constraint.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some consistency criteria, even as you drill down into the individual actions of a worker. But yeah, behavioral mereology seems to be a nice framework for that.
Okay, but do you think we should present this after you present this, or that doesn't really matter?
I think it doesn't matter. I think we can do even the labor one first, because I think mereology one is just a bigger framework, but not necessarily, it's not specific enough to talk about cooperation.
This connects to something else. I mean, the reason why I'm proposing this, which I think since we've been talking about it like last week, and we're still working on this for the primer. I mean, if we're vibing with Pedro next week, like we could present this in 2 weeks, I guess, like not this week, the next one, perhaps. I don't think there's anything in 2 weeks, right?
Unless the basic income one is.
Yeah, no, I think Raquel and I need a bit more of time. But the reason why I mentioned this idea is precisely because it connects with this thing. We're teaching a course on Marx's theory of rent and the logic of basic income in the next semester. We're studying it now, reading up on the material and so on. We have kind of a critique of how basic income is usually thought of and things like this. And I think that in a couple of months, probably mid-May or something like that, we'll be in position to, like, Raquel said that for her to present is usually best if she has the time to write something and present it more formally, because she feels more comfortable with speaking in English in this way. So probably if we imagine it's something like mid-May, like a bit later on, just gives us a bit more time to prepare. But it connects with that because we want to link basic income and the problems of cooperation at the level of production, and not just like redistribution of wealth and things like this. So it's a good topic to connect. Like currently, our thesis is that we should find a way to decouple basic income from the state as the necessary mediator of how, like, the sort of lineaments of basic income distribution is organized. But it's a bit too crazy for now. We still need to work a bit on this.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting though.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it's also going to be, I mean, I'm really tempted, but I'm trying to avoid it because we're reading the third volume of Capital together, and I think it would be like a paradise for your, it would finally bring together your microeconomic bourgeois deviations and the Marx stuff. That's where it all meets, so it's really good place to
yeah, that's the battleground.
That's the battleground, exactly. So at some point it would be good to also go there, I think. I'm really amazed at it. Like volume 3, it really clarifies so much, man, because you see that most it's a weird thing that I think applies to a lot of, not only to political economy, like liberal political economy, but also to a lot of liberal philosophy, or more American philosophy as well, which is this weird thing that Marx says, which is, he doesn't call it microeconomics, but the idea is that the categories that apply to methodological individualism, they are usually meant to apply, like the content of them comes from the bottom up, but the form of them comes from the top down. So you need to presuppose the whole structure of society to come up with a concept of competition, but then you fill it with the content that is just like local individuals, like it's very sophisticated, like the way that he kind of reconstructs, he gets to the point where he reconstructs like demand and supply. He anticipates a lot of stuff that you can see in like neoclassical economics and so on, but clarifying why those forms would be the forms that we use, it's really amazing. So at some point we might want to, I don't know, primer 7, it's not even, shouldn't even be called a primer anymore. It's like here we go again.
Yeah.
At this point, it's like, it's a primer to what exactly?
Yeah, it's a primer to what? But yeah, anyway, so I think we have something, just covering everything. So something for next week, then 2 weeks time. That's already early April, so first week of April here, kind of thing. Sorry, before this, so 3 weeks. Then just after that, then there might be some wiggling, some arrangement there, just so you guys don't need to do 2 presentations in a row. But there is first week of April, then end of April. I think there is a couple of empty slots there.
Wait, it's not clear to me where scale relativity, like you and Yasha, who's presenting first, me and Pedro, or you and Yasha? Because like both presentations about
Are too
scale
close
relative-
together, right?
Yeah, they're close together.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure if
either way.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
see what you guys prefer. Let me see. So today's the 15th, right? Let's write it in terms of days. We can do this already. So this is the
Yeah,
22nd.
whatever works. We can keep it
Sure.
flexible as well
Yeah.
as we work on it.
So this is 29.
29.
Then it's already April. So the
Then,
first
yeah,
week
it's
of
the same-
April would
it's the
be
same
you
week.
guys.
Around 3 weeks is the same thing as the first week of April.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the 5th of the 4th.
Yeah.
So we can just present after they present, right? Perhaps we can even use it.
Like, yeah.
So
12,
this
I
is
think.
12 of the 4th, and then end of April. I mean, this can be either 19 or 26.
26 for me is better because I'm doing already something in the week of the 19th.
Sure.
I will be preparing.
So we can. I mean, this is already.
Wait a minute.
month away.
Wait a minute. I might have a problem there. Just a sec. I have to. I'm examining PhD candidates. Blah blah blah. So I have to see the. I think it falls in that week as well. I will have to do the Gianotti thing in first week of May, I think.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So that would be 3rd of the 5th.
Because of that, I have a whole week of interviews and all of that I have to do.
No, don't worry.
So the week before I have this presentation in Russia, the 20th, that I will be probably getting crazy about, and then the next week I have to interview candidates. One of which is Pedro, and then I'll do the Gianotti.
That sounds like cheating, huh?
It's not cheating. I asked to be in the in the board for everyone that was interested in having me as a thesis advisor.
Still sounds like cheating.
I think
Even more.
I think I'm the better equipped to
No,
to-
I agree.
Yeah, so I mean, in any way, there are a couple of weeks free that we can either study, like read more of the Bogdanov book, or perhaps Thiago can present. I mean, I don't know when he will be ready. I mean, that's
I
already
can
creates
also
a bit
do
of.
the linear logic one, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah, we
like
didn't-
more like game semantics, ludics. I mean, we can do like a little bit of everything.
Great.
But yeah, I can do that.
That's
I have the best titles I see now.
Yeah, you have the I mean, you should start talking about the mustard clock.
The what?
Have you read that paper by Girard, the mustard clock?
No, I haven't.
This one, it's like 2 pages long. It's just a joke with.
Yeah.
It's such a moron, stupid joke. He is so annoying. Where is it?
Yeah, he really knows he's smart, right?
He really knows he's smart, like a bit too much for his own sake, I guess. Yeah, I'm not gonna find it now. It's should be here, but it's a really short text called the mustard watch, I think, or it's not clock, it's watch.
I'll look into it and bring a report.
Send it in the WhatsApp group.
Yeah, it's this one
I'll do it. Yeah.
here. An integrated approach to time and food. He signed it Ringard instead of Girard.
Oh, that's great.
And it's just like a really stupid joke on how people do like logical papers that have absolutely no meaning. Like mustard watches, definitions and main results. Let W be a classical watch. A mustard watch derived from W is a double prime obtained from adding a certain amount of mustard in the mechanism. And here it shows how to add the mustard.
And on this attack on logicians, I have to go. I have to walk my dog.
Yeah, it's better.
But,
It's better.
I'll see.
I
see
could
you guys
also
next
do
week.
something in those gaps that are.
So the gaps. So So on the Ludix one, Pedro, do you have an idea of where you wanna?
Like we can do it after you and Yasha do the scale relativity
So is it
thing on the
12, then
19th.
on the 19th, okay,
Yeah.
great. And Johnny, we're saying?
Well, I think I've got two basic ideas. One is more the case studies, and that is what I could do soon. And that would be looking at, you know, a lot of those things I mentioned in the last list. A lot of stuff in the Middle East and Asia and stuff, and a lot of focused on like information security and how, you know, the logistics of that. Asians, exactly. Asia and
Asian
stuff.
stuff.
And then the other presentation would be more like going through operations research, like the actual science of it, and then how that would enable us to actually rethink the state in more of like a TB sense. So that would be more of the political theory that you get on the basis of modern logistics. But that would be more like probably like May. I would be able to do that
Okay.
latter one. And then something more on like case studies, I can, you know, let's find a gap and then I'll just get it ready by then.
Yeah, if you want, like, we have a gap on the 26th of the 4th. Is that too soon?
Oh, the 26th? Yeah, that's more than, I mean, I was thinking like weeks, not over a month.
Yeah, because I think
it
that
looks
the
like everything filled
5th,
up, so I can do
yeah,
that.
the 5th, yeah, for before that, the 22nd, there is something, then the 29th, there is something, then the 5th, 12th, 19th. Yeah, the next one would be 26th. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then is the Gianotti. Yeah.
Then it's the man, yeah.
So yeah,
I'm
sometime,
really excited for that.
yeah. So then let's just put sometime in May. I'll have a more like methodological look at the same kind of ideas.
Yeah, so I think we can leave like the stuff that is, I mean, right now we're already in May, right? First week of May. I think the stuff that comes after that, we can, like the exact dates for May, like two months or so ahead, I think we can leave it. Like if, for example, Reza wants to present before Renzo or the inverse, or if Raquel and I are ready, I think we can see what happens, right? But this already gives us like my idea is to add all of these meetings to the update here. Already have it kind of set up with Zoom meetings and stuff, so it's.
I'll get you a better title than Asian stuff then.
Please.
I'll figure that out and get it to you in the next day or two.
I lost the beginning of the meeting. Do we have something planned for the tech talk? Or-
No, we don't. We said in the beginning just that it seems like it would be good to bring a report from the Tech Talk work into the main discussion, simply because it kind of connects a bunch of the research and debate. So it would be good to do it. I mean, we should probably have considered that before we added like 300 dates.
Well, I was actually wondering if it's okay with Pedro, could we maybe integrate that with the Vibin next week?
Yeah, for sure.
Nah, good. Yeah, like.
That maybe we could spend some time, you know, either separate them or if they organically flow together. I mean, I don't know.
What's the name of
That's a
that
good
guy
idea.
you guys were talking about on the Tech Talk group?
Modebug. We're talking about Modebug.
Yeah, you were talking about.
But we're talking about like
Creep.
the real person, like Curtis Yarvin.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He's a special one.
Yeah, so I mean,
Neo
not so
reactionaries
vibing, but yeah, I
Vibing
agree.
with
I think it would
algorithmic
be-
socialism and with neo-cameralists.
Like just a
I
very
don't
quick
even know how to write.
comment. Just a very quick comment. I did this live YouTube live on Friday about Brazilian Garstani and the translation that was just came out. And there was quite a bunch of Duginists in the audience asking like traditionalist questions like, is Reza Negarestani out for destroying Dasein, etc. This kind of I actually answered.
Yes, the answer is
Okay,
yes.
yes, that was my answer. Yes, we do want to destroy Dasein. We all want to destroy Dasein. Quite
That's what we
bizarre.
tell Reza is now the purpose of our group. We can now like finally condense it
Oh
down.
yeah, that's a good tagline. Destroying Dasein. I like it.
That's good. Yeah, that was quite surprising. I wasn't aware there was like a big, Duginist thing going on in Brazil. Like, what's going on? I'm not, of course,
They're all
it's
from Porto Alegre.
but in a live about Reza, the guy is saying like 2 or 3 or 4 like people who sounded like traditionalists in this Guénonian sense or things like that. Quite bizarre,
It's either the Brazilian royal family members or some like random people from Curitiba and Porto Alegre.
Yeah, I think they are from Curitiba, probably, most probably.
But every
Definitely.
political orientation have their own pet right wing. So you need to love the right wingers that follow you. Like they're specific kind of to each current. It's very, very incredible how you get those. Like if you start talking about national bourgeoisie, like some Maoists do, suddenly you have very specific liberals agreeing with you. Or if you talk about, left populism, suddenly some people are cheering and you're saying like, why are you coming to our stuff? Like everyone has their own. It goes.
As an ignorant gringo, do you all recommend any English language websites on Brazil news? Because it's hard to find reliable stuff. That's not,
It's a good question in English, right?
Yeah, I will
I
have
mean, that's
to.
basically why I started going to Turkey, is I couldn't find anything in Turkish, and so I don't know if it's the same situation.
So you might turn up here in Brazil.
I might show up need to crash on one of your all's couch at some point.
Okay, so this comes here. Okay, so we have a lot of stuff. This is the stuff we don't have a day for, but it's already much less.
I like the name change trend, because so far they've been largely like long lists of very intimidating topics, but now we're getting into some more humor and like.
Yeah, I mean, you can call it whatever you want. I mean,
I like it's complicated. I mean, it's very accurate.
Okay, you want to keep this? Okay.
Yeah.
You can
no,
put an
actually,
emoji next to it like this.
So guys,
Okay,
I
guys.
have to take off.
Yeah, me too. I need to cook some dinner. Yeah, no, but I think that this gives a good kind of good overview of stuff. And I mean, I think that one good thing we could try to do as an exercise. I mean, when I post the schedule there, I'll just suggest this. Is that it would be good, like if we. I mean, I hope it doesn't sound too stupid, but it probably would be a good idea if, as we present new stuff, perhaps for the next one, which is a bit more loose, it's not necessary, but if we try to like spend like 10 minutes before giving a summary from how the research thus far looks from the perspective of what we're doing, something like this. I mean, it might be a good kind of.
I think it's like I'll do my best to do it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, but I'm saying this when somebody else is doing something next. It's very convenient. Like I think it would be great if some other person did some work. It's not really fair, but just in the spirit of what we were talking about in the beginning, right?
No, but I definitely agree, and I think that like maybe much more easily alignable with like platform stuff also.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out.
Yeah.
So we can get something, I think, out of this.
Also, I mean, just to close on the topic, Caron, you mentioned that website, that program software that you're using for.
Obsidian. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we as I think Hansel wasn't here. We're just saying at the beginning of the meeting that we're we're reaching a tipping point where this thing is going to be incomprehensible, and that there are way too many connections we should be making to cross-reference that doesn't really appear here. So we were thinking about some method to do this that would be like easily indexable and, you know, would allow us to perhaps have a short summary of what we did and a lot of tags onto other meetings. So it's like a wiki kind of thing, you know? So I don't know, it's just an open topic, but I think it's something for us to talk about if anyone has an idea of an easy solution to that, you know? Anyway.
Well, when you said the summary, you meant like the person presenting just like saying, or also like, because a short description, maybe that's what you meant, but like
Yeah, I meant like, I meant to, like, for this last comment was the idea that we should try to just improve our website a bit in such a way that, for example, when you post a new presentation, you also add some reference, like you add a short description that has some hyperlinks in the description to other presentations, you know, just to bind them together. But the previous thing I said is that it would be a good idea kind of to go along with that if we try as we go along with the different presentations, you know. Of course, you don't need to give like a totalizing summary of everything. But imagine that some third party that is not in the group is actually starting to click on these meetings, you know. If the meetings start with a bit of a, okay, we saw that before, this thing we're going to see now might connect with those things in this and that way, even if it's not very strict, you know. But this sort of continuous attempt at situating new material in the context of previous material could be a good idea, just as a didactic principle, I guess. But it's, again, it's just a thought. It's not more than that. Yeah, guys. Okay, so should we call it a day?
Yeah, I need to.
Yeah.
Okay,
Bye.
sleep well. Bye-bye.
Good talk, everyone. See you next
Bye.
week.
guys.
See you guys. Bye.